Direct from our newsroom in New York, in color, this is the CBS Evening News with Harry Reisner substituting for Walter Cronkite and Richard C. Hottelet at the United Nations, Tony Sargent in An Hoa, South Vietnam, Bill Stout at Nellis Air Force Base, Texas, Bob Gregory in Washington, Neil Strasser in Washington, and Ron Hunter in New Orleans.
Good evening. The United Nations Security Council has unanimously condemned Israel for its commando raid on Beirut International Airport last weekend. The Council also said Lebanon is entitled to redress for the 13 airliners destroyed in the attack. And it warned Israel that it would have to consider further steps if such acts are repeated. Here are the 4 key points of the Council's resolution as they were read to the 15-member body.
First, condemns Israel for its premeditated military action in violation of its obligations under the Charter and its ceasefire resolutions. Second, consider that such premeditated acts of violence endanger the maintenance of peace. Third, issues a solemn warning to Israel that if such acts were to be repeated, the Council would have to consider further steps to give effect to its decisions. Fourth, considers that Lebanon is entitled to appropriate redress for the destruction it suffered, responsibility for which has been acknowledged by Israel.
Will all those who are in favor of the resolution so indicate by raising their hands?
Ceux qui sont en faveur de ce projet sont priés de lever la main.
The resolution has been adopted unanimously.
It is noteworthy that the Council acted quickly after less than 48 hours of debate, that it acted unanimously, and that the resolution was much more moderate than the Arab states and the Soviet Union had wanted at first. It does not mention compensation for damages, which would have opened a legal can of worms, nor does it speak of sanctions. Lebanon wanted United States support, but the United States would accept no one-sided radical pressure on Israel. It felt that the isolation of unanimous condemnation would sober the Israeli activists and show the Arabs that Washington would support their legitimate complaints. The Soviet Union protested but went along, perhaps foreshadowing further cooperation by the big powers to stabilize the Middle East. Israel's ambassador Joseph Tekoa brushed the resolution aside, however, as disregarding his country's rights, and he declared that Israel's fate would be decided not by others, but by itself. Richard C. Hottelet, CBS News, United Nations.
The State Department confirmed reports today that the United States has been in contact with Russia on the Middle East problem. A spokesman said that the proposals discussed were designed to aid the United Nations in its peacemaking efforts. Israeli officials emphasized again that they will not accept any peace terms imposed from the outside. They maintain that only an agreement worked out between the Israelis and the Arabs can solve the Middle East crisis. Jordan has charged that Israeli aircraft crossed into its territory today and attacked a police patrol car on the road to the port of Aqaba. 3 officers were reported killed and 2 wounded. The Israelis said they destroyed the car after it opened fire on Israeli troops who were chasing Arab infiltrators. Israel's Minister of Religion criticized Pope Paul today for a statement expressing grief over the Israeli commando raid on Beirut Airport. The minister said that while the Vatican consoled Lebanon, it, quote, turned a blind eye to the terrorist attack on our airliner at Athens. 1 Israeli passenger was killed when Lebanon-based Arab commandos shot up the plane.
We're thinking about introducing Benson & Hedges 100s around the world. After all, we've had the disadvantages to ourselves long enough. Cigarette that made Extra Puffs popular in America make Extra Puffs popular around the world?
At persona, we got a simple directive from our chairman of the board.
Our blades have to shave better than any other blades. Better!
So, we developed electro-coated persona blades, injector and double edge.
Better!
Better, yes.
President Chu of South Vietnam said tonight that his armed forces should be able to take over a greater share of the fighting from the Allies in 1969. However, Chu, in a New Year's message, did not estimate how many of the more than 550,000 American troops in Vietnam could be replaced. This evening, we get a look at some of South Vietnam's best troops on an operation near Da Nang. The reporter is CBS newsman Tony Sargent.
A group of South Vietnamese Rangers is trying to flush an enemy unit out of a tree-lined village near some mountains just west of the city of Da Nang.
The Rangers have pushed the North Vietnamese back gradually until the enemy apparently has decided to make his stand in the thick woods just ahead. The platoon leader radios for artillery support from U.S. gun emplacements a few miles away. The South Vietnamese have called in reinforcements who move up on the flank. To approach the wooded groves where the North Vietnamese are hiding, the Rangers must cross wide rice paddies with little cover. As the South Vietnamese Rangers pass the simple mud and thatch huts of peasant families, they pause to question anyone who might know anything about the enemy. The South Vietnamese Rangers are tough, the elite of their country's army. Man for man, they probably are at least a match for their enemy out in the open. The Rangers are proud of being able to do their own fighting by themselves without U.S. or other allied troops beside them. A standing joke in this unit refers to village geese milling about in confusion as American Marines. No matter how tough these South Vietnamese Rangers are, the enemy can hold them off when he's dug in deep. An American advisor working with this South Vietnamese Ranger unit is U.S. Army Captain Freddie McFerrin.
These South Vietnamese Rangers, you've lived with them and worked with them. How good are they?
Well, this battalion I work with here, the 21st, is considered to be the best Ranger battalion in Vietnam, and therefore it's got to be one of the best in the country because the Rangers, the elite forces, they're real good. The little people carry a lot and they suffer a lot, and the officers in this battalion are real fine, but they still need the United States, support, artillery, airstrike, and gunships, and such forth. But when they do have their own support, it's good, but they just don't have enough of it, and without our support, mainly medevac and airstrikes, they're really in a hurt because it really slows their process. They're moving down because they have to wait for medevacs, and their medevacs just hardly ever come.
The woods that block the leading unit of this advance remains full of enemy resistance, even after pounding by artillery. American jets are called in. Time after time, they drop 250-pound bombs into the woods. In support of their own troops, South Vietnamese pilots follow up with airstrikes in their old propeller-driven U.S. planes. They are noticeably slower and more awkward than the jets. The business of rooting out the enemy here where he has chosen to make his stand begins to take its toll. The luckier casualties are brought out and are treated by a medic. Up to the time of this battle, this campaign west of An Hoa had cost the lives of 60 South Vietnamese Rangers in about 3 weeks. But the Rangers, or the air and artillery supporting them, reportedly had killed more than 400 North Vietnamese. In the relentless equations of war, those are good results.
The South Vietnamese Rangers may not be the very best fighting unit in the world, but some of them at least give all they have.
Tony Sargent, CBS News, west of An Hoa, South Vietnam.
South Vietnamese units operating deep in the Mekong Delta have rescued an American Special Forces officer who had been a Viet Cong prisoner for more than 5 years. The officer, James Rowe, 30, of McAllen, Texas, is reported in satisfactory condition. A first lieutenant when he was captured, he has since been promoted to major, and it's estimated he will receive $50,000 in back pay. Federal investigators revealed today that more than 5 million gallons of jet fuel, gas, and other petroleum products were stolen during 1967 from U.S. military operations in Thailand. A report released by the General Accounting Office said that most of the widespread thievery was accomplished by bribery of U.S. personnel and the forgery of delivery receipts, many made out to non-existent military units. The investigation was made after John McGee, a civilian inspector employed by the Navy, complained of irregularities to Senator William Proxmire of Wisconsin. Senator Proxmire had this to say about the scandal.
What has happened is that 52% of the fuel delivered for military vehicles in Thailand during a 10-month period was stolen. It also reveals that 40% of the jet fuel made available for our planes in Thailand was stolen. Now, this is a very, very shocking situation. There's not an indication as yet whether this came into communist hands, but it was stolen. Men are being court-martialed because of it, or have been court-martialed because of it. But one of the saddest aspects of this is that John McGee, who did what I think was a very brave and necessary thing, blew the whistle and stopped it. Mr. McGee was recalled to this country. He was put in a position in which it was clear he would be fired. We inquired about this, and after we inquired, he was reinstated. However, he was not given an in-grade pay increase, which everybody else received and is almost unheard of. So one of the victims of this was the man who had the bravery and the intelligence and the patriotism to stand up and make a complaint.
Senator Richard Russell of Georgia suggested today that the U.S. should grant diplomatic recognition to Red China. In a television interview in Winder, Georgia, Russell, one of the Senate's most influential members, said that wars are seldom caused by talking to people, and sometimes they are avoided.
When someone has a cold or flu, a Get Well picture works wonders for the spirit. For the fever, you want the strongest fever fighter you can buy, aspirin. Get Bayer aspirin because Bayer is 100% aspirin, and aspirin is the strongest fever fighter you can buy. You see, a Get Well picture and Bayer aspirin, they work wonders.
Here's an important word from Bayer in case the flu epidemic hits your home. When the flu strikes, doctors and public health officials urge you to follow these 3 steps. Rest in bed, drink plenty of fluids, and take aspirin to reduce the fever and relieve the aches. So get Bayer aspirin now. Bayer is 100% aspirin, the world's best aspirin. And aspirin is what doctors and public health officials recommend. For the pains and fever of a cold or flu, Bayer works wonders.
The Soviet Union today announced the world's first test flight of a supersonic jet passenger plane, which may go into limited service in 2 years. Called the Tu-144, the swept-wing plane is designed to carry more than 120 passengers at about 1,500 miles an hour. The much-delayed Concorde, being built jointly by Britain and France, has not yet been tested, and a planned American supersonic plane is even farther behind schedule because of design problems. Senator-elect Barry Goldwater today took a test ride in the F-111 fighter bomber and blamed much of the criticism surrounding the plane on what he called stupid bungling in the Defense Department under Robert McNamara. Recently, the Air Force also permitted newsmen to fly in the problem-plagued craft. CBS News correspondent Bill Stout reports from Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada.
The most controversial aircraft in U.S. military history. One of the most beautiful, and, according to the Pentagon, the most destructive instrument of war ever created. It's the F-111, the swing-wing fighter bomber that was the pet of former Defense Secretary Robert McNamara. He wanted a swift and powerful new weapon which would, for the first time, be used by both the Air Force and the Navy. And now, for the first time, newsmen have been allowed to fly in the F-111 to see for themselves the object of years of political and military dispute. Since reporters are not known for either flying skill or physical fitness, the Air Force had a full day of briefing, required business before any civilian was allowed to get near the cockpit. The plane has a two-man crew, and the complexity of its equipment keeps both busy, so even the newsmen had certain duties to perform in flight.
The two you'd be interested in as far as the navigation computer is concerned would be our destination, latitude and longitude. As you know, all maps are, navigation maps are made up using latitude and longitude as the whole world's marked off in.
For a plane capable of better than 1,600 miles an hour, even the casual passenger needs careful fitting.
I want you to put this on, if you will, please.
Which way is the front?
This goes on your head like that.
Well, how do you put it on? That way?
Well, for now. But
I can't hear anything.
I'll show you better next time. Okay?
You still have ears? It's the right side.
Yeah.
After all that, the flight itself. The swing wing extended for takeoff. It works that way for landing, too, letting the F-111 use runways that no other jet can even approach. Some features of the instrument panel are classified, but most are not. And it's no secret, this plane is fully capable of delivering nuclear weapons anywhere in the world. The most remarkable feature of the plane is the guidance system that carries it close to the ground, as close as 200 feet at supersonic speeds, beneath enemy radar, skimming just above every hill, dipping into every valley. Depending on how close, the pilots call it a Cadillac ride, or Chevrolet, or Jeep. And the newsmen's flight covered all those variations all around Nevada. The argument about this aircraft began in 1962, when the contract went to Texas-based General Dynamics, and some cried politics. The charges shifted to safety earlier this year. 8 were assigned to bombing North Vietnam, and 3 were lost. Twice the planes were ordered grounded. In defense of the 111, the Air Force points out that in the first 15,000 hours of flying, no new military airplane in recent years had a better safety record, and most did a lot worse. The flyers who know the plane resent the criticism of the F-111. Typical was my companion, a man who flew jets in Korea and has done 100 missions in Vietnam, Major Joe Hansard.
Compared to the other aircraft I've flown, well, this one is, of course, much more automated. The accuracy in is utterly phenomenal. And, of course, the first aircraft, the very first aircraft, we have a true all-weather, day or night capability, getting to the target without any external navigational aid required to deliver either nuclear or conventional ordnance. First aircraft.
Does that mean it's the best we have?
Yes, absolutely.
But the criticism of the F-111 continues. Here, Bob Gregory interviews one of the chief critics, Senator Stephen Young of Ohio.
As a member of the Armed Services Committee, in my view, and I take a very dim view of it, this has been a disaster to our nation. It's most costly when it comes to taxpayers' dollars. I would like to see the entire thing scrapped, and still I know that the Air Force and the team that's experimenting with it at the present time seem to be very enthusiastic about it.
Well, how do you explain the Air Force's apparent satisfaction with this plane if it's as bad as you say it is?
I know that this is propaganda coming from the military industrial complex, and I think that the Air Force of our country has been sold a bill of goods on this F-111. I hope I'm wrong, and I may be wrong, but I'm quite certain in my own mind I am not.
Mother, can't you sleep again? I keep telling you about Nitol.
How do I know they'll work?
Would you believe good housekeeping? Look, Nitol has the good housekeeping seal.
Really?
So you know it's safe. Just follow directions and non-habit forming. It's different from other sleeping tablets, too.
Different?
It dissolves faster, so it helps you get to sleep fast, and you wake up feeling good.
Well, if it has that good housekeeping seal...
I'm a denture wearer and a dental technician, but I drink 8 cups of coffee a day. I know how coffee stains dentures, so I won't use anything but Polident now.
People keep coming back to Polident because no tablet, powder, or paste gives them the cleaning satisfaction of Polident. No wonder dentists surveyed recommend Polident over all other leading brands combined. No wonder denture wearers keep coming back to Polident.
Yesterday, Senator Edward Kennedy announced that he will challenge Senator Russell Long of Louisiana for the job of Senate Democratic Majority Whip in the next session of Congress. It was an announcement received with more than passing interest by his Senate colleagues. Neil Strasser reports.
In the Senate today, the Happy New Year salutations took second place to the question, ask of all and sundry, what's your count in the Kennedy-Long race? There were many persons counting, but few able to find that either Russell Long of Louisiana or Edward Kennedy of Massachusetts yet had the 29 votes necessary for election at Friday's caucus as Assistant Democratic Leader of the Senate. Each appeared still a bit short, and the best verdict appeared to be it was still very close. In rather un-Kennedy fashion, the Massachusetts senator is represented as having entered the race without advance assurance of victory. He's quoted as saying someone ought to get out there and take some chances to give the party leadership a new look. Kennedy claims the important backing of Vice President Humphrey and Senator Muskie, and Muskie today said he will nominate Kennedy at the caucus. But in Louisiana, Ron Hunter of WLAC-TV, New Orleans, asked Long about Humphrey's position.
I did talk to the Vice President, and I have the impression that this Senator Kennedy said the Vice President was for him. He's bad in Arab. Hugh Humphrey has been a personal friend of mine for 30 years, and based on what he told me and what he has to say about it, I would give him the impression he perhaps advised the senator what he thought the various matters were that a person should take into consideration in making that decision to run against me. But I'd be willing to let him cast a deciding vote if I really thought that it'd make that much difference. As a practical matter, though, he's not going to be in the Senate when the time comes. He will not be vice president. We'll have a new vice president. And he won't be voting in the caucus.
But do you feel that his support will go to you? Of course, he is the nominal head of the party at the moment.
I don't think he's going to get into it. I think he's going to do just what he did the last time I had a fight for this job. Take the attitude that there are 2 or 3 good friends running for the job and hope that the best man would win.
Do you feel that this is part of a move toward the 1972 presidential election, or is this a sign of dissatisfaction among Senate liberals with your work as well?
Well, I just don't want to say how that would be.
Long's aides claim victory is assured. The Kennedy camp is silent. A half dozen or so Western senators may hold the deciding votes, and a deciding factor for them could be Long's influence as chairman of the Senate Finance Committee over the funding of conservation and power projects in their states. Neil Strasser, CBS News, Washington.
Tonight we have some film of the world's longest surviving heart transplant patient, South Africa's Dr. Philip Blyberg. He seems unusually camera shy, in fact hostile toward photographers who have not negotiated with his agent. Day after tomorrow, the 58-year-old Blyberg will mark exactly 1 year with his new heart. He's been back to the hospital on and off since the operation, but now appears to be resuming a near-normal life. He's written a book, and since autumn, he has been allowed to drive his own car, even through heavy traffic in Cape Town. He's also resumed swimming and is shown being assisted in walking along a narrow breakwater where any one of us might need assistance. He then dives into the water, a celebrity amid a crowd of onlookers, and paddles about on his back. This close-up shows the long scar on his chest, now fully healed. He could be almost any man enjoying late middle life, except that it all began for him less than a year ago, and he's been enjoying it for just the last few months. In London, Sir Leary Constantine today became the first Negro member of Britain's House of Lords. Sir Leary, 67, was once a professional cricket player in the West Indies who became a diplomat and lawyer. The announcement of life peerage came in the Queen's New Year's honors list, which included various citations for almost 2,000 persons. Prices on the New York Stock Exchange, after a general decline in December, which included a series of sharp losses, were mixed in 1968's final session today. Volume was 13 million shares. The exchange index gained 5 cents.
Did you hear that Martha Divers made a better chocolate cake?
How? The new Betty Crocker sour cream chocolate fudge cake and frosting.
The only mixes with sour cream in both the cake and frosting.
Richer, moisture-tasting cake. Richer, more flavorful frosting.
Make a better chocolate cake and the world will beat a path to your door.
You haven't touched that lunch you ordered.
We're jammed today.
Won't get your vitamins skipping lunch.
Gotta keep practicing tryouts this afternoon.
What's a mother to do?
Serve them Total, the vitamin cereal, the only leading cereal with a whole day's vitamin supply. 1 bowl, 1 ounce, gives you 100% of every minimum daily adult vitamin requirement now set by the U.S. government.
Get your vitamins come what may when a bowl of Total starts your day.
This is the last CBS Evening News report of 1968, and the general feeling is that's just fine. It has not been most people's favorite year. At parties tonight, you'll find yourself saying, well, I'm glad to see this one go. There's hope that just on the law of averages, 1969 has to be better than a year in which about the only good national news was the trip to the moon. It's not taking away from the triumph of the astronauts and being named Men of the Year to say that it wasn't much of a year to be men of. If we could have foreseen last December 31st the events of the last 12 months, there might have been a general agreement to forget it, skip the year, go directly to 1969, or maybe even 1970, scrubbing the whole decade. The end of a year, of course, is artificial, a synthetic convenience for marking a point in time so we can see where we stand. As such, there is great psychological value to it. Looking back on horrors and failures, we can already say at 1 minute past midnight tonight, that was last year. This year can be different. It's a point of division, and even on a New Year's Eve when it's hard to be nostalgic about the year behind, we can still be hopeful about the year ahead. And since all years are precious just because they are finally all we have, it's all right to have a cup of kindness for this one. That's the news. This is Harry Reasoner for Walter Cronkite. Good night and Happy New Year.
The CBS Evening News with Harry Reasoner substituting for Walter Cronkite. This is CBS Television.